The logic felt watertight for a long time, which is what allowed it to operate for so long without being dismantled. I had been in the role for 6 years when I knew, not suspected, not vaguely sensed, but knew with the particular clarity that comes after enough time, that it was wrong for me. Not catastrophically wrong. Not in the way of daily misery or active suffering. Wrong in the quieter, more manageable way of a life that is proceeding at a significant distance from the one you actually want. Wrong in the way of spending 40 hours a week doing something you are competent at and that leaves you feeling, at the end of every week, like you have used up something without putting anything back. I stayed 2 more years after that. And the logic that kept me there, the logic I want to examine here, is one I have heard from enough other people that I believe it is not specific to me. The argument was this: I was 34. I had 6 years of specialized experience in a field that was not the one I wanted to be in. Starting over would mean, at minimum, beginning from a much earlier position than the one I currently occupied, in terms of salary, seniority, credibility, all the accumulated markers that translate into a certain kind of stability. 6 years of progress would not transfer. I would be, in certain measurable ways, back at the beginning. And 34, the argument went, was too late for that. His name is David, a friend from the years before I took the job, and he is one of the few people I told this to directly. He was sitting across from me at a table in a restaurant we had been going to for years, and I laid out the argument with what felt like reasonable clarity: the investment of time, the sunk cost, the impracticality of the math. He listened carefully. And then he asked a question I was not expecting: too late for what? I didn't have a clean answer. Too late to start over, I said. Too late to build something from the beginning. He asked what exactly would be too late about it. What was the mechanism by which 34 made starting over impossible in a way that 28 had not? I explained about the seniority, the salary, the years of experience that would not translate. He said, so the cost of changing is real. Is the cost of not changing not also real? I did not engage well with this question at the time. I said something about stability, about responsibility, about the difference between a 22-year-old who can absorb a bad bet and a 34-year-old who cannot. He let it go. But I could tell he didn't find the answer satisfying, and in the years that followed I came to understand that he was right not to. The too late logic contains a hidden assumption that I was not examining. The assumption is that time moves in only one direction inside the wrong situation, that each additional year in a role that doesn't fit represents accumulating security or stability, building something that can be weighed against the alternative. What I was not calculating was that time also moves in the right situation, and that every year I spent in the wrong one was a year I was not spending building the thing I actually wanted to build. The sunk cost I kept invoking was real. But the opportunity cost I was ignoring was equally real and considerably larger. At 34, if I had left, I would have been starting over with approximately 30 years of working life ahead of me. At 36, when I finally did leave, I had approximately 28. The too late logic had cost me 2 years of the life I was trying to protect, in the name of protecting it. The thing about the role that made it such an effective trap is that it was not bad enough to force a decision. I was not miserable in the acute, undeniable way that produces decisive action. I was uncomfortable in the diffuse, manageable way that produces adaptation, that produces the gradual normalization of a situation until the situation becomes simply the condition of your life, unremarkable because it is familiar. I had adapted to the fit so thoroughly that I had stopped noticing the friction except in moments of particular stillness, when the ambient noise of daily obligation quieted enough that I could hear myself. What I heard, in those moments, was consistent. It was not dramatic or urgent. It was just the persistent low note of wrongness, the sense of a life proceeding along the wrong track, not catastrophically, but steadily, in a direction I had not chosen and would not have chosen if I had been given the choice clean. The job was project management and logistics. I had fallen into it through a sequence of circumstances that felt, at the time, like reasonable responses to immediate pressures. I needed income after graduate school, the opportunity appeared, the salary was better than alternatives, the work was not difficult. I was good at it almost immediately, which turned out to be its own kind of problem. Competence in the wrong field is a comfortable trap. It generates the positive feedback that makes it easy to stay, the sense of being valued and capable, without generating the particular satisfaction that comes from doing work that actually matters to you. You can spend a career being good at something you don't care about and never quite be able to articulate why the career feels hollow. The competence muffles the signal. What finally moved me was not a revelation. It was accumulation. It was a specific Tuesday afternoon, I remember it with unusual clarity, when I was sitting in a meeting about container routing and I had a moment of such complete absence that I became aware of it. I was present in the physical sense, seated, attentive in appearance, capable of responding correctly when addressed. But I was not there. I had not been there for a long time. And in that particular Tuesday afternoon moment of self-observation, the too late argument dissolved, not through counter-argument but through the simple question of whether I wanted to be here at 54 having spent 20 more years in this particular form of absence. I left 4 months later. The transition was as difficult as I had predicted, in certain respects, and different from the prediction in others. The salary reduction was real. The loss of seniority was real. What I had not predicted was how quickly the sense of forward motion would replace the sense of loss, how different it felt to be doing work that was wrong for me versus work that was right, even when the right work came with more uncertainty and less recognition in the early period. The too late argument had calculated only half the ledger. It had correctly accounted for what leaving would cost. It had not accounted for what staying would cost beyond the calculation of the immediate present, the compound interest on a life spent accommodating a fit that was never going to improve because the fit was structural, not circumstantial. I am 41 now. I do not think of the 2 extra years as catastrophic. But I do think of them as years I spent maintaining an argument I had already lost. The argument was never about being too late to change. It was about being too afraid to find out whether the change would work. Too late was the language of calculation. The actual thing was fear. Naming it correctly, when I finally did, was the beginning of being able to move. Here is what I carry forward from this, and what I hope might be useful if you recognize any part of your own story in mine. The pattern I described does not operate because we are careless or unintelligent or unaware. It operates because it has a function, because it is doing something for us that we have not found another way to do. Staying in the wrong situation, staying silent when we should speak, not walking away when the door is right there, all of these behaviors persist because they are solving something, even if imperfectly. They are providing some version of comfort or protection or identity that we have not yet found a better way to provide. Understanding that function is the first move. Not judging the behavior, but asking honestly, what is this doing for me? What would I have to give up if I stopped? What am I afraid will happen if I make the change I know I need to make? Those questions do not dissolve the pattern automatically. But they make it visible in a new way. And visibility changes the relationship to the thing. When you can see what something is doing, you can start to choose whether you want it to keep doing it. The change that followed was not easier because I understood the mechanism. It was the same difficulty. But I went into it knowing what I was moving through rather than being entirely inside it without perspective. That perspective is what I want to pass on here. Not the specific story. The structure. The shape of how we stay in things longer than we should, how we look away from things we can see, how we tell ourselves the thing will change without giving it a mechanism for changing. You are not alone in this. It is not a character flaw. It is how the human nervous system manages uncertainty and fear. But you can do something different. The doing starts with the looking. Look at it. Directly. Honestly. Without the story that makes it easier to carry. And then decide what you want to do with what you see. That decision, fully conscious and fully yours, is the only kind that actually changes anything. There is also something I want to say about the specific moment of turning toward rather than away, the moment when you actually do the thing you have been not doing. Because that moment has a texture that I was not prepared for, and that I think is worth naming so you know what to expect when you reach it. It does not feel like relief. Not at first. The moment of change, of finally having the conversation, or walking away, or saying the thing, or making the decision, often feels worse before it feels better. There is a period of acute discomfort in which the old equilibrium has been disturbed but the new one has not yet settled. You have stopped managing the avoidance, which means the thing you were avoiding is now fully present, no longer softened by distance. That period is real and it is temporary. I want to say both of those things with equal emphasis. It is real, do not be surprised by it, do not mistake it for evidence that you made the wrong choice. And it is temporary, it has a duration, and that duration is almost always shorter than the years of management that preceded it. The other side of that period is different. Not perfect, change does not produce perfection. But different in the specific way of someone who has stopped spending energy on maintaining something and can now spend that energy somewhere else. The ambient cost disappears. The weight that you had normalized as simply the weight of life turns out to have been specific and removable. I have felt that release more than once. Each time it is instructive about how much I had been carrying that I didn't know I was carrying. You probably know what you're carrying. You just haven't decided to put it down yet. When you decide, it will be hard first and better after. That is almost always the order of things. And the better, when it arrives, is real. What I notice now, in the life I have after the story I told here, is a kind of attentiveness I didn't have before. Not anxiety, that's different. Anxiety is looking for the thing that might go wrong. What I have is more like a quiet, ongoing check-in. Am I here because I want to be? Am I saying what I actually think? Am I moving toward what matters or managing around something I haven't named? These questions don't produce constant disruption. Most of the time the answer is, yes, I am where I want to be, saying what I think, moving in the right direction. The check-in confirms what I thought. And that confirmation is itself valuable, it builds a different relationship with my own choices. They feel more like choices and less like things happening to me. On the occasions when the answer is different, when the check-in reveals an avoidance or a suppression or a staying too long, I try to act on the information faster than I used to. Not immediately, not impulsively. But without the elaborate deferral structure. Without the "I'll address this when the conditions are better." The conditions will not be better. They will be different. Different is workable. Better is a fiction. I am the only condition that changes. And I change through the practice of looking and then acting on what I see. That's the whole thing. The looking and the acting. Over and over. For as long as it takes. Which is your whole life. But a whole life spent actually inside it is worth more than a whole life spent at the edge of it, managing the view. I know which one I want. I think you do too.